Hello, welcome to this webcast on Thorogood Curator, a solution for managing Lloyd's core market returns. By way of an introduction, my name is Julia Honigsberger and I'm a Principal Consultant with Thorogood Associates. Our agenda for the webinar covers a quick introduction and an overview of Curator, but the main part of the webcast is a demonstration of the product. And at the end I'll talk a bit about how a typical implementation of Curator might go, and finish with a bit on Thorogood for anyone who isn't familiar with the company. The challenge Curator's addressing is the robust management of the many forms that a syndicate needs to submit to Lloyd's every quarter and annually, covering the quarterly monitoring returns, the newer Solvency II returns, investments, GQD, North America statements and the TPD. Producing these returns is often managed in spreadsheets, and the benefits of Excel in this case can become the main problem with using this to support the process. It's difficult to automate, difficult to trace where numbers come from, difficult to track changes and validate across workbooks. And with new requirements from Lloyd's possible every quarter, there's an ever-increasing potential for error. Curator looks to overcome these inherent Excel issues. Data is loaded automatically, but it's under the control of the reporting team. It's still possible to make manual adjustments, but within a controlled, audited process which includes a sign-off. The flow of data is clear and traceable, and changes to forms are handled as part of the product, taking away the responsibility from the reporting team. In terms of a technical overview, Curator leverages the benefits of Anaplan, which is a cloud-based planning and analysis tool, along with a robust SQL Server data store for loading data from source and retaining history. It also manages the complexities of the current CSVs, but it'll also handle the upcoming portal changes. Finally, there's a fully flexible ad hoc reporting component that we'll see in the demo. Let's take a look at how it works. I mentioned Anaplan is the main user tool, and you can access it via the browser, so there's no need to install any software on your machine. And when I log in, I can see any model I've been given access to. So here I've got the annual and the quarterly Curator models, along with the group reporting model. Once you've invested in Anaplan, you can build other models to support a wide range of planning and analytics areas such as the SBF, underwriting planning, expense planning, those kind of applications. I'm going to load the annual model. I start on the home page, which shows me each return and the errors and warnings associated with them. Below that, I can see the status of the data loaded into the system, along with an indication of any adjustments that haven't yet been signed off. I'll come back to adjustments later. As I click on any return, the forms associated with that return are shown in the table on the right. And I can see, for example, that for the ASR 002, my review of this is in progress and I've got a couple of warnings. So let's have a look at the form. Each form is on a dashboard, and the dashboards can get a bit busy because they support an awful lot of information. But for any form, I can just open it up into full screen mode to take a clearer look. The form has a number of items on each page. For example, here we have the various versions that Curator's supporting. We can look at the current year, the previous year, what we reported in quarter 4 where there's an overlap. I'll come back to the submitted slice later on. I can also look at the data either as received from source, or I can filter out just to any adjustments that I've made. I can see here that I've made a couple of adjustments. What will go out on the CSV is the final version, the source and the adjustments added together. And each form will contain any other of the required axes on the page. For example, here I've got the various years of account, and I can report any of those individually. Let's go back to the dashboard. On the right of the dashboard, there are a number of tables which help me to understand where information came from that populates the form. For example, if I click on deferred acquisition costs, I can see that that data either comes from the QMA 002 for the gap value, or for the Solvency II value, that's coming directly from my ledger. And if I scroll down, I can see, for example, the actual SAP accounts that we used to map for that value. They don't have any numbers in, this is just test data in this example. But if I look at the UK GAAP value, which was sourced from the QMA 002, I can see the exact line that it came from, 28 deferred acquisition costs. So this helps me to understand where all of the numbers on my form come from. So what if I spot an issue? Ideally, I'd fix that at source, but maybe there isn't time to fix it at source, or maybe there are numbers that aren't held in my source system that I want to include. So how do I make an adjustment? Well, maybe down here I've spotted that the figure being reported against government bonds doesn't look right, it's too high, and I want to adjust that, and I can see that it should have been on corporate bonds. So I'm going to select government bonds, and I can identify here on the right the actual accounts that are making up my number. And I can see that maybe bonds US government is just too high. So I'm going to select that item, and if I now click to drill to the source data, I can see all the individual rows that went to make up that number. I can identify the row that should change, and if I flag it, I can now adjust it. But before I do that, I'm going to find its partner where I want to move the difference to. Back to the ASR, and I said it was corporate bonds, and maybe it's this account here. Now when I go back to my source, I can see that I'm looking at corporate bonds, and again I can identify the actual row that I want to change. I'll choose the first one in the list. So I've picked two items, and I can now set up my workbench. My workbench is a temporary area where I can make all of my adjustments before committing them. If I now click on Adjust, there are my two items on my workbench. And I just need to select an item, categorize my adjustment. These classifications can be set up according to whatever you need. I'll just quickly put a short description in, and I'll make my adjustment. I'll put in a very big number so that we can see what I've put in. In this particular implementation, there's no auto calculation of currency conversion, but that is an option that you can put in. Similarly, let's make my second adjustment to receive the difference. And let me enter the adjustment. Once I've entered my adjustments, I can save them. And then go and have a look at the review. And this is where I could produce a report which could be journaled out and given to the source system to make sure they know what journals have been put through. What I can see is I've actually ended up with 4 adjustments. This is because Curator recognises that if I make an adjustment to a form that's by either year to date or inception to date, it will create a similar entry for the partner so that the numbers still tie up. The report up here would show me any differences between pluses and minuses. I haven't got any because I've entered the same positive and negative number. And if I now go back to my ASR, I can see that rather than 268, I've now got 168 million. I can easily see that simply by drilling into just the adjustment slice, and there are my 2 entries. However, if I go back to my home page, what I can now see that this has introduced an error, and I need to clear all my errors before I can close the quarter. So let's have a look at the validations and see if we can see what's gone wrong. Here's the 002, and I can see that I've got 1 error, and if I scroll down I can see that the error actually is created because all my numbers need to be greater than or equal to 0, and by putting in that very large negative, my government bonds UK GAAP has gone negative. So what I'm going to do is very quickly just go and readjust that number, and that will then allow me to clear that error. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just choose the items that I want to readjust. I only have to adjust either the year to date or inception to date. Select to readjust. And now I'm back to my workbench. And I can just take each number and I'll just very quickly knock off a 0 to make it 10 million. And again, for the sake of demoing, I'm just going to put the same number in each of my reporting currencies. All done, so I'll save that. And now if I go back to look at my validations, what I can see is that that item's been cleared out because that number's now positive. So I'm back now to just a couple of warnings which I can investigate. We noticed on our form that it was able to show which of the accounts or items from other forms had been used to make up an item on a receiving form. And that's been done through a series of mappings which are under the control of a manager or a controller who's running Curator. And I can have a look at those by clicking on mappings. So for the ASR02, for example, we know that some things came from the QMA02. And if I click here, I can see that I've got a number of items here on the QMA that are feeding items on the ASR. And if I wanted to change any of those and I had the access rights, it's as simple as going in and picking an item. In terms of generating CSVs, I can do this through a simple screen where I just click to request the generation of a CSV. I can either select to do all forms within a return or simply select individual ones. And the final part of the picture is the control panel where I can see the status of my system. I can look at how many warnings, errors and unsigned off adjustments I've got, and I can submit the various returns. When I submit a return, the effect of doing that is to lock the data and move it into that submitted slice we saw on the form. Once that happens, the data within that submitted slice doesn't change whatever adjustments or new data is loaded into the system because it's the version of the numbers that was actually submitted. I can of course unsubmit a slice and open it up again if I need to make further changes. But once all of my returns are submitted, all of my errors are cleared and all of my adjustments signed off, I can simply click on my rollover button and that will clear the system down ready for the next cycle and move any data into previous years or previous quarters as necessary. So I have to do no work to set the system up for the next quarter. When we looked at the overview, I mentioned an ad hoc reporting tool, and this is implemented so that data can be accessed in Excel and holds all of the data that's been provided to Curator at the source level. And it's just like a large pivot table. So for example, here I'm looking at one of my financials, gap claims incurred. I'm looking at inception to date. It's data that comes from the warehouse and it's for a particular year end of 2018. And down here I've got a list of attributes that I can break the data out by. For example, I can simply drag to look at my data by reporting year of account. So this is just standard Excel, and I can start to look at any of the attributes within my data, and I can compare, for example, across data from my warehouse or from my ledger. And I can do all of the things that I can do in Excel to allow me to build up a series of ad hoc or customized reports that I can replicate period on period. For example, if I want to create a combination of all my non-prop items, then I can simply create an item non-prop and, for example, make that equal to casualty plus health plus marine plus property. And now I've got my non-prop line So I might want to remove, for example, because I'm double counting at the moment, I'll take those guys out and maybe move that alphabetically. And now what I've done is created, if you like, a custom measure, and every period I can refresh this report. I can do trending over time, I can look at what I submitted this quarter, last quarter, etc. So it's a fully flexible ad hoc tool that's looking at the data supplied to Curator from your source systems. Okay, that's all I've got time to demo in this webcast, but if you're interested in looking at the product in more depth, just get in touch. In terms of what an implementation might look like, it'll depend on how well your data fits to the current interfaces. If there's a good match, then it could be as little as 12 weeks. If there's more to do to prepare the data, then it will take longer. So probably the best way to find out is to carry out an initial assessment, which we offer at no cost. Once complete, we can give you a better indication of the full implementation cost, and you can decide whether to proceed or not. If you want to know more about Curator, just drop me a mail or contact me via the website. If you'd like to know a bit more about Thorogood, well, we're an independent BI and analytics consultancy with offices in the UK as well as the US, Brazil, Singapore and India. And we specialise in BI and analytics, from strategies and roadmaps all the way through to full development and support. We've worked with a number of Lloyd's syndicates as well as the wider insurance sector, and with some of the best BI and analytics technologies. In today's webcast we saw Anaplan and Microsoft. So get in touch if you'd like to know more.